Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Beyond This with me, your host, Zaheerah Bham Ismail. Today, we're exploring a conversation that many of us have often been steering away from, finding it uncomfortable to have, but we've decided that because of this platform, for many of your suggestions, we are having this conversation openly, honestly, and without shame. A conversation about menopause. For too long, it's been whispered about, misunderstood, and even dismissed. But this is a season of life that is not about ending. It's a powerful transition into a new beginning, a new chapter of health, wisdom, and self-discovery. I've invited Dr. Trudy Smith, a leading gynecologist in the Gauteng area, to help us with separating fact from myth, understanding what's really happening in our bodies, and also talking about how we embrace this change with knowledge, compassion, and strength. No matter which stage of your life you're in, whether it's the peri-menopause or into menopause, this conversation is for you. Trudy, welcome to the studios.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted.
Trudy, we have so many words flying around. Every time someone's got a bit of brain fog, a bit of fatigue, we go, oh, it's menopause, it's peri-menopause, it's pre-menopause. Just take us through the little bit of all those words.
Okay, so I think the important thing for women is that often we blame everything on hormones, and it's not always correct. So let's speak about the word menopause. So the word menopause really means your last menstrual period ever.
Okay.
Which is easy if you've got a uterus, because, if you don't have your periods, then you've had your last menstrual period. And then you are either post-menopausal, in other words, after your last menstrual period, or you are pre-menopausal, before your last menstrual period. So we go through our reproductive years. So remember, you went through puberty. That's when things changed and you got your boobies, etc., and you became a woman. Then you were reproductive. That's when you had your children. And then you became perimenopausal. Then you had your last menstrual period. So that was your menopause. And then you were postmenopausal. So those are the reproductive phases of a woman's life. Whereas a man will just have puberty, and then he's a man, and he will make hormones forever. Yeah. It's done. So we're born with a certain number of eggs in our ovaries, and those eggs undergo basically dying, attrition. So as you age, your eggs get less and less and less, and then finally you have no more eggs, and that's why you don't have a period, because you don't make hormones anymore. But that perimenopause can be a wild time.
Oh my goodness. So many of my friends have been discussing this, but how long is that wild time? Does this differ for every person?
It differs for every person. So remember puberty, and you look at your girls and you think, oh, they're going through puberty. Some are quick and some are not quick. Do you understand? And the same happens in our perimenopause. So we know the perimenopause can be literally 2 to 10 years, 2 to 8 years. So the average age of menopause, the last menstrual period ever, is round about 50, 51 in most women. But we know there are cultural differences. We know there are altitude differences, which is quite interesting. So in other words, we know that women who live at a higher altitude can have a slightly earlier menopause than women who live at lower altitudes. And culturally, we also know. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? So we know that Black women actually have their last menstrual periods earlier, for instance, than white women. Probably Japanese women also slightly later. And is it diet related? We don't know. But one thing we know is it's genetic. So if your mommy had her menopause round about 52, then you will have your menopause round about 52. If she had it very early, in other words, premature menopause. So premature menopause is when you have your last menstrual period before the age of 45. Between 45 and 50, we say an early menopause.
Is there a way you can actually just skip all of it? Are there women who actually skip the perimenopause state, just go into postmenopause and it's ease?
So can you go from 0 to hero kind of thing? So can you have regular periods and then bang, last period, never again? Very rare.
Okay.
Exceptionally rare.
So what are the common misconceptions you hear from women about menopause?
So first of all, there's a lot now out on social media. So everybody wants to blame everything. So, I have like 30-year-olds come to me and going, I'm perimenopausal,
That's why I asked you off air about the age, because we've got women in their 30s saying they're going through it, women in their 40s. Everyone is pre-menopause, peri-menopause, whatever you want to call it. And it's all over the place. I'm tired. It's a pre-menopause.
Yeah. So you can't blame everything on the perimenopause. So the word perimenopause and premenopause are the same. So because there's so much on social media, every woman who thinks she's tired thinks she's perimenopausal. But think about in your 30s, sometimes you're life tired. You're running after the kids. You've got to put the extramurals in. You've got to think about the dinner, blah, blah, blah. There's lots going on. So being tired doesn't make you perimenopausal.
So I'm going to come into asking about the tests and all of that we have to do. But what I do want to ask is, what are the hormonal changes that are driving or triggering the symptoms, the hot flushes, the mood swings, all of that?
So what happens is, as your eggs die, they start to die, which is normal, is that the hormones start to fluctuate. So you basically make too little progesterone and more estrogen. That's why the boobs can be super tender, and that's why you can have prolonged episodes of where you have a period, then you miss 1 or 2 periods, or your period will come early, or your period will be slightly longer or slightly shorter. So those are the signs of perimenopause. So it's the fluctuation in hormones. But women, for instance, who are on oral contraceptives, or women who are on contraception, will not be perimenopausal because they are taking estrogen and they are taking progesterone at a set amount. So you can't be perimenopausal. You are taking hormones. The only way we know you are perimenopausal is to stop those hormones. So you can't measure those hormones while you're on hormones.
So that's interesting, because a lot of women may not even realize that that's actually contributing. They're already starting hormone replacement therapy.
They wouldn't be getting really the symptoms of perimenopause. So we have to also acknowledge there are other reasons. For instance, thyroid disease can give you similar symptoms. They can make you tired, miss your period, put on weight, have dry skin, all the perimenopausal things. So thyroid dysfunction has the same symptoms as the perimenopause.
Amazing. But when we're talking about hormone replacement therapy, where does it actually stand today? Does it work for every single person? Who should be taking it? Who benefits from it? Who are the people that shouldn't be touching it?
Hormone replacement therapy is a very interesting question. So, and again, there's a lot of social media, a lot of talk about hormone replacement therapy. So, when a person comes to me and they say, I went to the doctor and he measured my hormones. Now they're 60. And he measured my hormones and I've got no hormones. And I go, thank goodness you have no hormones, because you're not meant to have hormones when you're 60. That's how you were made. They are meant to get less and less and less. So you should only use hormone replacement therapy if you have symptoms.
Okay.
It is a treatment. You can't replace what was given to you and now goes away.
That's also the misconception that we have, because we are seeing all this over social media where people are saying, go and get tested now. So you have a baseline of what you're supposed to measure up to and what you need to meet. Is there something in that? Is there something that we're supposed to be doing?
So I always explain it to patients, is measuring hormones and titrating hormone replacement therapy according to your hormone levels actually has no value. So if you are now had your last menstrual period, or they would become irregular, and in that irregular time you start getting hot flushes and you're not sleeping and you're getting night sweats and you are miserable and you have brain fog and you can even get palpitations, you can get crawling sensations underneath your skin, then maybe you do need hormone treatment, because hormone treatment has consequences. And don't think taking so-called body identical whatever has no consequences, because they have equally as many consequences. So you take treatment, you take medication because you have symptoms and you need it. It's not going to prolong your life, I promise you that. Only lifestyle modification, eating healthily, exercising, not being overweight is going to prolong your life. Hormone replacement therapy is not. But what it's going to do is it's going to keep your bones strong. It's going to stop you flushing. It's going to help you to sleep. And when you don't flush and when you don't sleep, you're not so anxious. And when you sleep better, we also know sleep has a profound effect on health. So weight gain, if you don't sleep, weight gain increases. So there are benefits, definitely, but it's not the panacea. It is not for everybody. There are certain women who should not be on hormone replacement therapy.
And I think all those things that you mentioned now, more importantly for me, is the quality of life that we're living. And that's what's important that we're missing out on as well. But when you just mentioned this now, in terms of our long-term health, how does menopause affect that with our heart, with our bone density?
Yes. So if we, for instance, we are now menopausal, or post-menopausal is the true word. We're menopausal. We've had our last menstrual period. Is that our bones get weaker. There's no doubt about it, because estrogen keeps our bones strong. And when you stop estrogen, then your bones get weaker. And especially if you don't exercise. And especially if you're too skinny or you're overweight, your bones suffer as well. So you should be doing weight-bearing exercise, strength training. You should be having a diet adequate in calcium. And yes, if you have issues with your bone, hormone replacement therapy will help you. But we never institute hormone treatment after the age of 60. If you give hormone treatment later on in life, it causes dementia. In other words, if you never took hormones from when you were menopausal, and now all of a sudden at 60, you're like, oh, my bones aren't strong, and now why am I still sweating? Give me hormones. The answer is no. Because we know older brains, older blood vessels, when they are given hormones, they clot up and they coagulate, and you can have strokes, you can have senile dementia and Alzheimer's. So there's what we call a window of opportunity. That is the buzzword. And that window of opportunity is in your early perimenopause or in your early menopause.
And I think that's so important to note, because we don't even realize the repercussions and the side effects of the long-term damages that we're actually doing while we think we're helping ourselves. And I love how you said the lifestyle factors of your diet, your stress, your exercise, your food, how it impacts to be able to make this a smoother transition into the next phase rather than a more stressful transition.
Absolutely. And, I think we don't put enough emphasis on, when we're young and so on, we don't appreciate what we're doing. So we know that maximum bone is laid down in your adolescence and up to the age of 40, 45, and then starts to decline. So we should be exercising more, weight bearing, strength training from that time.
I feel very victimized. I know, I keep saying I'm getting better at it, but we need to do a lot better now because our bodies remember later.
They do.
But Trudy, when we're talking about mood swings, anxiety, all the stress that comes with it, the brain fog, is that just hormonal, or is there also a psychological element to it?
Well, it's a bit of a combination. So we certainly know that women who had postnatal depression are much more likely to develop depression and anxiety as they transition into the menopause. Okay. So think about what happens when you have a baby. Soon after you have a baby, you have a mini menopause. You don't have your periods, you're breastfeeding, you flush. I don't know if you remember, you flush. Your hair falls out when you're breastfeeding. That's like what we would almost call like a mini menopause. So if you had depression and anxiety at that time, you're much more likely to have it at your transition into the menopause. And yes, estrogen is a happy drug. Estrogen makes you happy, and estrogen is what keeps women much happier. So if you become moody in your premenstrual phase, that's when your estrogen is dropping. And if you're moody during your periods, estrogen drops. So that's why, yes, we know that estrogen from a mood perspective is important.
I don't even know what to say. I wish we had words to say this got easier in our lives. Apparently, we never stop being women. There's always challenges at every part of our lives. This is why heaven is promised to all of us. Trudy, what role does identity play? Because for so many women, a lot of us being women is a part of our fertility, about being able to have our youth. What role does that play in terms of hitting menopause and dealing with all these changes in our body?
I think, I don't know if there's definitely cultural differences. Yes. So, for instance, in many Black cultures, when you reach menopause, you are very important. You are the person that people go to for advice. You are the matriarch. People gather around you. You are allowed to sit with the men. You are allowed to be with the men because you are no longer menstruating. So, whereas in many of us, we often feel like we're not worthy anymore. Our time is done. We're now getting old. And I think we need to also try in our heads, it's very difficult, but try in our heads to be revered, look up to, look at, our older community. They're fantastic.
Absolutely.
What advice do they give us? We're entering into that phase of being the real matriarch, and we should actually appreciate that and say, yes, this is me. I've lived my life. I've looked after my children. I've worked hard, and we need to be proud of it, but often we're not.
And we see that also in our community, and you talk about this matriarch, and we do see that in this owning of this space. But I think it has to come with owning this space that we're in as well. Absolutely. To be able to own that one.
And we certainly seem to think the matriarch is beyond 60 as opposed to, it's that transition time again, isn't it? It's that 45 to 60, what happens in that period? And it's very interesting, for instance, in the workplace. We were talking before we came on air on the workplace. So if you look in workplace environments, many women are sidelined in the workplace at that age group. And why? Because we're not so gutsy. We often are, we're not so sure of ourselves because we have these hormonal fluctuations. We're flushing, we're sweating, we're not feeling so great about ourselves. So there's a lot of work now on menopause in the workplace.
So how should workplaces be providing support for women in these stages?
So they should be near somewhere that, for instance, has aircon.
Something simple as that.
As simple as aircon or temperature changes. As we get older, we don't need to wear so many layers of clothing. But when we get beyond 60, we put on those layers of clothing as well. So appreciate that we might be a little bit labile and that, not everything is nasty, and we need to really embrace this change in women.
And we're talking about a workplace being supportive of it, but how are partners able to be supportive of it? Because a lot changes in terms of intimacy, your libido as well. So how do you navigate that in a relationship?
I think we need to educate men about these changes. We need them to appreciate that it's, women are dynamic and they might try and be the same all the time, but they're not. They pretend to be. But we need to educate men. I think education is key to everything. If they know this is what we're going through, and it's a hard time.
Absolutely, because I think you don't even know how to manage this. There's so many things happening in your life. There's so many things happening in the world. You have to deal with all of that, plus your entire body doing its own thing that you are completely foreign to.
And generally, that's the time when your children are getting married, they're leaving home. Now you have to look at your partner the whole day and not be around sorting out children things. So it does make it a difficult time for everybody. But I think, knowledge is power.
So with knowledge being power, what are the early signs that we should definitely not be ignoring?
So the early signs is a change in your period if you're not on contraception. Night sweats often is how it starts. Then you can think that you're going into the peri-menopause. I think you need to address any heavy bleeding or irregular bleeding or bleeding out of the time. Then you need to see somebody, because not every irregular bleeding, for instance, is related to the peri-menopause or the menopause, because so many women get neglected at that time. They think, oh, it's just me going into peri-menopause. In the meantime, they might have a uterine cancer or a cervical cancer or something else. So yes, a checkup is important over that time period. If everything is normal within the checkup, then to start opening the discussion, do I need hormones or not?
And do that early on, so we don't
do
miss
it
the
early
gap.
on. Yes. Have a mammogram. You can't have any hormone treatment without a mammogram. So you must have a mammogram, because there is, if you use the combination of estrogen and progesterone, that slight increased risk in breast cancer. So that's why we always like a mammogram before we institute any hormones. But it becomes a quality of life. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm quite happy to tell you I take hormone replacement therapy because I was terribly miserable off it. So, it depends on each individual woman. Some women transition with nothing and they're fine.
That is a good thing, and hopefully it'll continue as that. But when you mention now in terms of the mammogram, what are other tests or screening routines that we should be doing at this point?
So every woman should have a mammogram from the age of 40. Every woman, unfortunately, and man needs to have some form of colon screening now from the age of at least 45. So you can send your stool off for what's called a FIT test, because we're seeing more and more colon cancer. It's now become the second commonest cancer. So that's important. If a FIT test is literally sending your stool to the lab and they look for blood within it. Otherwise, you can have a colonoscopy every 10 years. We should be having a pap smear. Not just a pap smear anymore. We call it a pap smear, but actually it's a human papilloma virus test. You can even do your own. You don't have to go to the gynae. Now you can self-test.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is really quite interesting.
We're going to have you on
isn't
a
it?
whole show just about that, because off air we discussed so much about it that I think so many of us are completely unaware and ignorant about our own health. And like you said, knowledge is power and knowledge is key.
Absolutely. All of us should check our cholesterol once we start transitioning, because cholesterol goes up as you transition into your menopause. So,
are there any good things we can look forward to?
There's wonderful things. No periods. Yes.
But for many communities, menopause is still a taboo subject. So how do we change that narrative? I know you said knowledge is key, knowledge is power, but it's still looked upon as such a shameful discussion to have. And you see women really struggling and suffering in this change of identity.
And not just struggling and changing in the identity, but you see them flushing, walking around with fans and, not wanting to talk about it. I think it's forums like this. It's about us as women talking about it, not afraid to talk about it to our children, not afraid to talk about it to our elders. That's what's going to change the discussion and the taboo. I'm having a hot flush because I'm menopausal,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And instead of people insulting you, going, you must be menopausal, that's why you're behaving like this. What is the promising research treatments that you see coming up that women can actually hold on to with some hope that this becomes a more manageable phase of their lives?
I think, I think we went through a period of no acceptance of any hormones and women really suffered. And I think for me, the important thing is acknowledging that hormone treatment is not as bad as we thought it was, that hormone treatment has positive benefits for all of us, and if we need it, we can take it. And in women who can't take hormone replacement therapy, for instance, hormone replacement treatment, for instance, breast cancer survivors, etc., there are definitely new drugs that are coming out that help them with flushing. What we call, it's a very fancy name, it's called a candy neuron inhibitor. It works in the brain.
Okay.
So, an interesting thing is estrogen crosses over into the brain and it affects, I'm sure you've heard of the word serotonin, and that's why estrogen is the happy drug. And when your estrogen is a problem, your serotonin levels get altered, and that's why you get depression. But serotonin is also important in flushing. So often women who can't take hormone treatment will be offered an antidepressant, not for its antidepressant effect, but more for its effect on the what we call the thermoregulatory system, that flushing system. So if you again decrease flushing and you sleep better, then you're a better person.
I like that. And I think it's also so vital to go to someone who has an understanding of how all of this works, because there's not a one size fits all remedy for every single person that walks in. Everyone's got something different. We live in a country, Trudy, where there's a lot of cultures and very many that rely on cultural medication or natural remedies and that help them get through it. Is there a space for that as well to be able to manage all of this?
So when we look at herbal medication and other medications, first of all, unfortunately, there's not enough good research on it. So not enough large placebo control. So a placebo control trial is when you give, half the women the drug, half the women not the drug, but they all look the same. And so they don't know what they're taking. So there's not enough research on that, but we certainly know there's actually a good placebo effect. So when you take something, you think it's making you feel better, and it does make you feel better.
Because the truth of it also is no matter how natural anything sounds or seems or is being sold, there's side effects to everything.
Everything. And nothing's natural because it's made in a factory. Like everything else, it's made in a factory. I mean, the natural things is a healthy diet, low fat, lots of leafy green vegetables, the 6 colors on your plate, exercise. There's a little bit, actually, there's good data actually on yoga.
Okay.
Yeah, yoga and cognitive behavioral therapy for menopausal symptoms has very good data.
So very often we've been discussing all these triggers that are coming up in our lives now psychologically, and we've gone back to cognitive behavioral therapy very often. So it definitely fits well with that.
Yes.
If you could design a holistic menopause treatment program, what would be your main pillars?
My main pillars, I think, would be exercise. It would be diet. It would be obviously your screening, and it would be the use of hormone treatment for symptom control.
Perfect. Trudy, thank you so much for joining us in studio. I did tell you the time flies by very quickly, but thank you for sharing, not just giving us information, but empowering us with a sense of taking responsibility for our own health instead of just saying, I'll follow whatever is posted up onto social media. You have to be able to pair yourself with a doctor that you are comfortable with, who walk this journey for you so that you find what's right for you. And I think, as we said, it's not just an empowerment thing. It's also, you've made us feel that this is a stage where we get to understand, where we get to embrace it, and we navigate it with the right support, because we repeatedly said it's about quality of life that we want. And I love that you brought in aspects of our life, from lifestyle, fitness, exercise, less stress in our lives, to be able to manage this in a smoother transition. So thank you for that. If this episode resonated with you, please do feel free to share it with all the women in your lives and also with the men in your lives, because it is important that people understand how much is changing around you, so that people have a bit of empathy while you're walking this journey. Trudy, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in my studio again soon.
Good.
And thank you for joining us on air today. And remember that what comes next starts right here. It's time to take responsibility for our own care so we make empowered decisions for ourselves. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.